Hello everyone, thank you again for joining in our Diablo 4 ability trait tutorial series. In today's video, we're going to take a look at the player health and the stamina bar and create function to increase the player health and stamina bar, and also create a function to decrease this health and also decrease the stamina function as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we want to create a function where we're able to increase and reduce this scalar parameter value based on our player's health level. So for that, we need to create a function for our player health to begin with to increase it and reduce it. And in our third person blueprint character, if you remember, we already have a stat called update stats. And inside of it, we increase the player stat. And we only have built one for increasing the stat, but we never created one to decreasing the stat. So we're going to actually do that in this tutorial today. First thing, let's actually finish the HUD portion of it so that we can just go and finish off our function to increase and reduce the health in our third person character. I'm going to start with creating a custom function, a custom event, and call it update stat fill. And this update stat fill is going to take an input, and the input is, we're going to name it stat, and we're going to reference this to the E player stats that we created. And also we need to know how much to update it with. So this is the current stat value. So we're going to take the, oh, this didn't stat, there you go. Oh, okay. Stats, okay, that works. This is going to take the stat and it's going to check its current value, and it's going to set up our fill level based on the current value, whether it's being health or stamina. Now, this is going to be a type of float because our health and stamina are set up as a type float. So the function here is going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to drag off of the stat and say switch. And when we switch this function, we're going to grab these two functions that we have where we set the scalar parameter, copy it and paste it down here. And we can go ahead and disconnect this. We don't need to connect this anymore. Move the health function up a little, stamina function below. When it's health, we want to set our health value, and when it's stamina, we want to set our stamina value. And the value itself that we're going to set needs to be from 0 to 1. So we're going to take the current stat value and we're going to simply divide it by 100, and that will give us our fraction that we require to set up that 0 to 1 value here. And all I have to do is just drag this into both of these, and that is it for the function. And now with this setup, we no longer need this because we want to set up the player's health stat and the stamina level when the game starts using our third person character. We don't want to start at a level 1. We want to start at the level which is defined in the third person character. We don't want to do a hard coding like this. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. Before we go into the third person character, one more thing that we need to do is go into your material folder that we created all this material. Go to your health orb material and set up this fill value to 0. We want this to start empty, and when the game starts, we want the HUD to take a look at what's the player's current health and then set up this fill value based on the player's current health. We don't want to start full. Same thing for stamina, and we're going to set this to 0. Apply and save. We're going to go to our third person character. We have a update stat function which increases the stat. And to do the decreasing of stat, it's exactly the same thing. It's just need to subtract instead of updating, increasing. So we're going to go ahead and do a different call here. One is in the update stats, we're going to create a new string. And this is going to be, the name of it is going to be type. You can use an enumeration for this, but for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to just use this. And I'm going to drag off of this type and say select, switch. It's going to say switch on string. Select this string, and then we're going to get rid of the default pin, and then we're going to add two cases. Index 0 is going to be add, index 1 is going to be subtract. And as you can already guess, we have already done our add function through here. So I'm going to drag the add and I'm going to put it on this switch. And because this line is going across the map, I'm going to go ahead and say get stat to update and just put it down here just to keep it nice and clean. And this would do the function when it is add. And when it's subtract, we want to take this increase stat function and we want to reduce it. So I'm going to right click on this increase stat and I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to say decrease stat. Okay. Compile and save. In here, we take our current player stat and we'll add the amount to increase and then we clamp it to the max and we return the new stat. We're going to do the same thing and we're going to just replace this node and then say subtract. And instead of saying add to amount to increase, I'm going to say amount to decrease. And there we go. And this is the value. And the max stat is always going to be that 100 that we have here, or whatever, if it was stamina or health, these are the max stat that we set up. So because we're clamping it, even if the player has only 10 health and we reduce 20, it's going to go minimum 0. Max value, because the player can have a maximum value that can be dynamic, that's why we have this pin here set up this way. But for minimum, you want to 0 should be the minimum. There's no need for going to -1. And this is your return stat. And do the same thing here. Copy and paste this switch on ePlayer stats. And I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste these two, health and the stamina function. Drag it over. Inside of the health, I'm going to, instead of increase stat, we want to do decrease stat. So input, I'm going to connect it here. Target is self. Player stat is health. Amount is this. Maximum health is this. And the new stat will be our new health. And then we can go ahead and drag this into our new and then delete this. Bring this down. And that's that. Let's go back and do the same thing for stamina as well. We want to say decrease stat. Input, connect the input pin here. Stamina is the stat that we want to affect. Amount and the max stamina. And the new stat will be our new stamina. And this would be our new set stamina. Okay. That's it. And now I'm going to quickly rename this. It's going to say decrease health, right? And then this is going to say decrease stamina as well, right? And then this one we're going to say increase health. This one is increase stamina. Okay. Now I have done a string here. If you would like, you can always use a enumeration. I don't see a reason for needing to use enumeration because it's only going to be either add or subtract, unless you go into building the player stats where you need to divide or multiply and such like that, which I have a tutorial coming up soon to show you a full setup of player stats and more complicated version of doing player stats. But for the time being, I think this should do the trick. So how this is going to work is when we call in this function, update stats, it's going to say, is it an add function? Do we need to add stat or are we going to subtract the stat? If it's going to be add a stat, it's going to take a look at which stat are we going to add. Is it the health stat or the stamina stat? And if it is subtract, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to take a look at which stat are we going to subtract. And from there, it's going to, if it is health, it's going to do the decrease health function and set up the new health. And if it is decrease stamina, then it's going to do the decrease stamina function and it's going to do the function there. So how this would work is we can just go off of this C because we're going to add XP and also do the same thing. I'm going to say update stats. And here of the type, I'm going to say add, right? And I'm going to say add health. And I'm going to also say add 50 health. I'm going to take my current health and because I'm going to set it to 10, which is already set here. And one thing that we do want to do is if we were to play the game right now, you would notice how the stamina bar is now empty, but nothing's really happening here. Even if I press C, C, the XP is going up, but nothing's happening to our health bar. That's because we haven't really called the function that we set up to update the stat fill. So what we want to do is, we don't want to call it on the actual trigger. We want to call it when the stat actually increases or reduces. So when we call increase stat, we're going to go to our update stats. In here, where we go and say increase the health, we want to call in the function for get player HUD and say update stat fill. And we want to feed it our new health in there and then set this to health. Same thing, I'm going to just copy this. We only need to set this up once. I know it looks like it's a lot of setup, but we only need to set it up once. Again, every time you do a function to update any of your stats, you just have to call this function. Call player HUD widget stat fill. And same thing for decrease health, right? And then increase, put in here. I forgot to plug this one in. Okay, compile, last here. Now I'm doing it the most simplest way possible. I would usually use an interface to do this communication. But for the purpose of this training, I'm using a more simple blueprint function to get this done. You can always choose to do an interface and then call in the interface function instead of doing this, and then add the interface to your widget, and then that would still run. Same thing, and not a big difference, but the interface is much less heavy compared to calling in references. But let's move on. So now that we have called in the references, so when the player health updates, it's going to go ahead and update the player HUD. Well, one more thing that we do also want to do is when the game starts, this is our begin play, we want to set our HP bar. Right now, if you see the HP bar is empty because we emptied it out in the material. So we want to set up our HP bar based on our current health and stamina stat. So I'm going to copy and paste that exact same function that we were just using. I'm going to say as soon as the game starts, take the player health and the stamina as well. Take the player stamina and update it. So now if I were to start the game, I've already set this up, so I'm increasing the health by 50 points. Actually, let's increase it slowly so we can actually see it. So let's do 10 points, and I'm going to do the same thing here. Copy, paste, and I'm going to say increase the stamina by 10 points, and there's an add. If I press play and press C, you notice that it is actually adding 10 points to our health and our stamina benefit. Now, and then again, I'm adding more and more. I'm pressing C, but nothing really happens because we have the clamp that stops it from going any further than our max health and max stamina. We're going to do the subtract version. So I'm going to just say keyboard B, okay? And this, I want to do the same thing. Copy this to function, put it down here. When it's pressed, instead of add, I want to say subtract, right? Oh, go back. Diablo 4 tree, sorry. I'm going to paste this here, subtract. You can make it into a variable if you would like, so you don't have to type it every single time. So now if I were to press C, the player health is supposed to go up. And if I press B, the player health will come down. Did I set this as stamina? Yes. The stamina is not coming down. That's because if I go into decrease stamina, I haven't set this to stamina. There we go. And now if I press play, C will increase the health, and then B will reduce that. That should be a good place for us to stop here before we go any further into the last couple sections of this training. In our next video, we're going to take a look at the actual using the ability and setting up the input actions for each and every single abilities that we have with the player. I really do appreciate your time today, and thank you again for joining me through this tutorial series. And I really do appreciate any type of questions or concerns that you have. If you can add it to the chat so I can take a look at it. And if this video had helped you in any way, consider liking this, as this helps me grow the channel and get to more and more players just like you. Thank you once again for joining, folks. Have yourself a wonderful evening.